Financial and business ethics. Having God on your side justifies nothing, and we should be mightily wary of anyone, especially anyone in a position of leadership, who justifies their actions according to God, whoever/whatever that is. Subjectivity of interpretation. Interpretation of God is a subjective endeavor influenced by a myriad of factors including cultural background, personal experiences, religious teachings, philosophical outlooks. If we take monotheistic religions as an example, such as Christianity, Islam, and Judaism, God often refers to one all-powerful being who is believed to have created and rules over the universe. But even within these religions, individuals and groups have quite different perspectives on God's nature, qualities, and intent. In religions such as Hinduism, the concept of God is more fluid, representing different aspects of nature or cosmic forces. In an atheistic perspective where God holds no personal significance or literal existence, some atheists may interpret God as a metaphorical symbol of human values, while others may reject the concept of God entirely, but interpretation of God can still play a major role in shaping person's moral framework, societal values, etc. Big part of how individuals interpret the concept of God is based on personal beliefs and experiences. This interpretation can be influenced by many things, such as education, religious affiliation, philosophical outlooks, emotional experiences. As a result, some actions of events may be considered as an act or sign by God, while for others it may mean nothing. As a rule of thumb, there is strong correlation for a person being very religious and something being seen as an act or will of God. Ethical implications. Problems arise when individuals in positions of power invoke God to justify their actions. This can lead to unethical dilemmas and abuses of power, as personal interpretation of God may or will be used to legitimize actions that harm others or violate ethical norms. Examples of this can be seen in most terrorist attacks where mostly innocent people get hurt or pay with their lives, and most if not all these attacks are justified by religion beliefs. These appeals to God undermine accountability and respect for human rights, and leaders can achieve such matter by exploiting followers' faith, fear, or desire for meaning. Understanding the subjectivity of God's interpretation emphasizes the importance of critical thinking, open dialogue, and interfaith discussion. Encouraging people to question their beliefs, communicate their ideas, develop empathy and respect for others' points of views will help to foster mutual understanding, tolerance, and collaboration across religious and cultural lines. Historical precedents. Justice and God aren't always seen the same way by everyone. People might have different ideas about who God is and what's fair. This shows how people can understand things differently, especially when it comes to what's right and what's religious. Teutonic Order. The Teutonic Order, a Catholic religious institution, was founded as a military society, initially tasked with providing military protection for Catholics in Eastern Europe. However, in their quest to expand influence, they embarked on aggressive campaigns against indigenous peoples, justifying their actions as defenders of Christianity. This approach led to forced conversions, enslavement, cultural destruction, and mass killings. The Salem witch trials, which took place in colonial Massachusetts between 1692 and 1693, were a terrible period in American history characterized by injustice and widespread panic. Started by charges of witchcraft, the trials ended with the hanging of 20 individuals, most of them being women, and the incarceration of numerous others. The trials, which were driven by societal tensions and personal grudges, mirrored the deeply rooted superstitions, anxieties, and devotion to God of the day. The Salem witch trials provide a depressing warning about the dangers of excessive fear, discrimination, and a culture of violence. Jonestown Massacre. Jim Jones, who claimed to be the Messiah, used doctrine to impose strict control over his followers. His sneaky tactics led to the catastrophic incident in which, under his direction, some 900 people swallowed Flavor Aid laced with cyanide, resulting in one of the greatest mass murders in modern history. European colonization. European colonization was often justified by the doctrine of discovery, a concept rooted in Christian theology. This led to the pursuit of wealth, power, and natural resources, resulting in forced conversions, slavery, cultural erasure, and violence. Spanish Inquisition. European colonization was also often justified by the belief that it defended Catholics, but this rationale led to the torture, persecution, and execution of thousands of people under the Spanish monarchy for deviating from religious orthodoxy. This history highlights the dangerous consequences of intertwining religious authority with political power. Lessons learned. In examples presented earlier, we can see that all of them had one thing in common: religious beliefs. In these instances, individuals and groups justified violence, killing under the guise of serving God. These examples show us that religious beliefs might not lead to moral righteousness and ethical behavior. Ethical autonomy. Ethical autonomy is the idea that people should not only be able to follow rules of faith, but also be free to make moral decisions in a varied community based on reason, empathy, and universal principles. This freedom is restricted when God is used to support decisions, disregarding the values and beliefs of the individual and forcing one's own belief system on others. These are the reasons it is preferable to choose ethical autonomy than depending on religious teaching for moral guidance. Universal principles. People with diverse cultural, religious, and philosophical backgrounds should be able to comprehend and agree upon universal principles when making ethical decisions. This makes it possible for people to live in a more accepting and peaceful society where shared ideals like justice, fairness, and empathy allow people to come together. Evolution. Over time, ethical principles can change and evolve thanks to ethical autonomy. New problems and complications that may not be sufficiently handled by conventional religious teaching emerge in a society that is changing quickly. By enabling people and society to adapt their moral frameworks in response to new information, societal advancement, and changing conditions, ethical autonomy makes sure that moral judgments are applicable and useful in resolving modern-day problems. Human rights. Human rights have been protected and advanced through ethical autonomy. Societies can better protect essential rights like freedom of conscience, expression, and equality if they permit people to make moral decisions based on common sense, empathy, and reason rather than rigid obedience to religious doctrine. By enabling people to defend and promote human rights free from the restrictions or prejudices found in some religious concepts, ethical autonomy promotes greater respect for equality and human dignity in society. Example: when it comes to environmental protection, scientific data and consideration for future generations take priority over the teachings of religion in a society that is driven by ethical autonomy. Based on the universal sustainability principles, supporters of protecting the environment can advance policies like carbon reduction and renewable energy. When compared to countries where religious beliefs might block environmental action, this strategy results in more successful conservation efforts and better protection of the earth. Overall, ethical autonomy promotes a more inclusive and harmonious society where people can coexist peacefully despite their differences. Erosion of accountability. The erosion of accountability from an ethics perspective can be understood as a breakdown in the moral responsibility of individuals or institutions to answer for their actions, decisions, or the consequences. This erosion can occur for various reasons and in different contexts, but it often involves a weakening of the mechanisms that hold individuals or entities responsible for their ethical conduct. Ethical theory perspective. From an ethical standpoint, the erosion of accountability due to the invocation of God can be analyzed through various ethical theories, including virtue ethics and deontological ethics. Virtue ethics places a strong emphasis on the value of moral integrity and character. People may become morally complacent because they think they are intrinsically good or moral when they think a higher power has approved of their behavior. This might undermine personal accountability because people might not consider the moral ramifications of their conduct critically because they believe that receiving heavenly approval releases them from blame. The Rwandan genocide. More than 800,000 people perished as a result of the Rwandan genocide in 1994. Ethnic conflicts between the Hutu and Tutsi populations drove the genocide, while the military and government leaders utilized ethnic and religious rhetoric to defend their policies. As a result, no one was held accountable for the crimes carried out during the genocide. The Rwandan government and military commanders utilized theological methods to claim that the Tutsis were not Rwandans and, as a result, had no rights in Rwanda during the genocide. This was the role of religion in the genocide. They asserted that their actions were approved by God and that they were battling evil Tutsis. The Tutsi population was dehumanized and their mass murder was justified by the use of this discourse. This sheds new light on the importance of religious belief systems in genocidal violence and how people can perform horrible, highly unethical acts just because they feel approved by their gods. The aftermath. The genocide's justification by religious and ethnic authorities resulted in a dearth of accountability for the crimes carried out during this time. Leaders in the government and military who carried out the genocide were able to avoid accountability by saying that their actions were guided by a higher power. As a result, there was a culture of impunity, and no one was held accountable for the genocide perpetrators. Deontological ethics is a moral theory that emphasizes duty and moral laws. It holds that people have a duty to uphold moral standards regardless of the repercussions. On the other hand, when people use God to defend their behavior, they could put heavenly directives ahead of moral obligations to society or stakeholders. When people selectively follow religious commands, they may put their religious obedience ahead of their ethical commitments, which can result in a disregard for their accountability to stakeholders. The sexual abuse of minors by priests and the subsequent cover-ups by church officials have long been the subject of scandal within the Catholic Church. The Church's response to these allegations has been criticized for prioritizing the protection of the clergy and the Church's reputation ahead of the victims' well-being and public accountability. According to deontological ethics, the Church has a moral obligation to keep its members and the general public safe and to hold people accountable for their wrongdoings. Nonetheless, church authorities have frequently used the holiness of the priesthood or divine decrees to defend their deeds or inactions and neglect accountability for their actions. It's recorded that many bishops are allowed to engage in conspiracy cover-up and spend huge amounts of parishioner money to hire lobbyists to make it more difficult for survivors to confront their abusers in court. Church authorities hire top lawyers to resist the disclosure of legal documents, further perpetuating a culture of secrecy and protection at the expense of justice and accountability. There has been a failure to hold stakeholders accountable as a result of placing heavenly instructions above moral obligations. Clergy leaders have been charged with suppressing reports of sexual abuse and moving priests to different parishes without disclosing their history of abuse. This has hindered victims' access to justice and permitted abusive priests to carry out their crimes. A culture of impunity has also resulted from the Church's preference for religious obedience over moral duties, which allows perpetrators of sexual abuse and cover-ups to go unpunished. Exclusion and discrimination. Appeals to God as a justification for discrimination have been a long-standing issue in society, often reinforcing social hierarchies and perpetuating inequalities and injustices. Discrimination based on religious beliefs or interpretations involves unfair treatment of individuals who do not adhere to the same religious beliefs or interpretations. This form of discrimination can lead to exclusion, marginalization, and even violence against those perceived as different. In the United States, there have been several instances of discrimination against LGBTQ people based on religious beliefs. For example, a Christian baker in Colorado refused to make a wedding cake for a same-sex couple, citing his religious beliefs as the reason for his refusal. The couple filed a complaint with the Colorado Civil Rights Commission, which ruled in their favor, stating that the baker had violated the state's anti-discrimination laws. However, the case was appealed to the Supreme Court, which ruled in favor of the baker, stating that the commission had shown hostility towards his religious beliefs. This case highlights the tension between religious freedom and anti-discrimination laws, particularly in the context of LGBTQ rights. While religious beliefs are protected by the First Amendment, anti-discrimination laws prohibit discrimination based on certain protected characteristics, including sexual orientation and gender identity. The challenge lies in balancing these competing interests and ensuring that everyone is treated fairly and with respect. In this case, the baker's religious beliefs were used to justify discriminatory behavior towards a same-sex couple. This type of discrimination can have serious consequences for LGBTQ individuals, including exclusion, marginalization, and even violence. It also perpetuates harmful stereotypes and contributes to a culture of intolerance and bigotry. To address this issue, it is important to promote understanding and respect for diversity, including religious diversity. This can be achieved through education and awareness-raising campaigns, as well as through legal frameworks that protect the rights of marginalized communities. It is also important to promote interfaith dialogue and cooperation, as well as to address the root causes of discrimination, such as poverty, social exclusion, and lack of access to education and employment opportunities. In conclusion, discrimination based on religious beliefs or interpretations is a complex and multifaceted issue that requires a comprehensive approach to address. By promoting education and awareness, enacting legal frameworks, fostering interfaith dialogue and cooperation, and addressing the root causes of discrimination, we can work towards building a more inclusive and just society that respects and values diversity. In conclusion, different people's perceptions of God highlight how arbitrary religious belief is, but using God as a shield from responsibility can have far-reaching negative effects such as exclusion from society, prejudice, past horrors, and diminished accountability. A more inclusive and equal society requires that decisions be made with ethical autonomy and universal principles be given priority over religious ideology. Thank you for your attention.